Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone. Your journey, our passion.
This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy, episode 241 for May 9th. Motor racing is such a drag. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time or 2200 GMT. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or by following the links on our website. Gary Vasilash, we got another show to do tonight.
We do, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing real well. I had an interesting experience this week. I drove down to the Ford Sharonville transmission plant, and this is something that doesn't get a lot of love from people, but boy, I'll tell you, you go to this place and you see this operation, and they're making 180,000 gears a day.
Wow.
To go into transmissions. And it's the Ford Gear Center of Excellence. And just to talk to the people, whether they're management or people on the floor, it's incredible to see the level of enthusiasm and commitment.
Really?
That, you'd think this is a completely repetitive thing over and over and over over, making these gears. And it was very impressive, very impressive.
So these are front drive, rear drive, what kind of transmissions?
Well, at the plant, they're making the total transmission for the Super Duty trucks. And so they're rear drive transmissions, big heavy duty things. But they supply gears and components that they ship up to Livonia, they ship to Van Dyke, they ship elsewhere for front drive applications. And basically they're providing components to, I believe it's every car that Ford offers in North America, with the exception of the Focus and the Fiesta. I think that's it. I may be wrong on that, but again, it's just part of the industry that a lot of people have no idea.
They're unsung heroes.
Yeah, it's no idea stuff like this goes on.
Critical part of the industry that nobody knows about.
Yeah, and it's sort of funny. Because Livonia is just
not far from here.
Basically down the street, and they said, no, you got to go down to Sharonville to see this, and I'm glad I did. It was a very interesting experience.
That's cool. I went to the Bataan Death March, as I call it, Fiat-Chrysler's next 5-year plan. In fact, we're supposed to have Karl Henkel from the Detroit News joining us. He just called. He's stuck in traffic. He should be here momentarily. But that's pretty interesting. We can dive into that discussion once he gets here. But I don't know if you noticed, we ran it in Autoline Daily today, and of course it's all over the media. Steve Harris has been tapped to come back to General Motors. And just so, for people who don't know Steve, he's one of the all-time masters when it comes to public relations. When I first met him, I believe
Chrysler.
No, American Motors.
American Motors. That's right.
He was at American Motors.
Yeah.
And then when they bought, Chrysler bought American Motors, boom, Steve ended up there.
That's right.
And of course, over the course of time, he ended up as the top dog in public relations there. And then I think he retired from Chrysler, or was he hired away by GM? I think he retired.
I think he retired, was hired by GM, retired from GM, went back to GM,
retired
from GM, and now
they're calling him back.
Yeah. and Steve is just a great guy. And you would have to be in PR for as long as he's been in PR. Putting up with the likes of us for 30-some years is quite an accomplishment. But it surprises me in some way that they're doing that. It's sort of like, okay, they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. They're criticized for just going to the well, using their inside people, and now they're essentially. Steve's been out of it for what?
Number of years.
Yeah, it's about 5 years.
5-6 years, yeah.
Since he's been out. So he's sort of an outsider, but knows where all the pieces are and knows how the game is played. And so he's sort of this wacky hybrid. But, I just think about guys. I mean, so what we had Chris Pruce sitting across from us about 3 months ago at Ford now, but
he used to run GMPR.
And I got to wonder, did they put the call out to someone like that and say, come on back, because he's got skills. I mean, there are lots of people who have skills that can deal with, crisis communications, who can be the face of the company since Selim Bingle has retired. And he was pretty invisible when he was there as it was.
Completely invisible, and I think he was fired, not retired. But that's the way
Since he left the building.
Since he left the building, that's right. But, clearly Steve Harris is, again, a stopgap for them.
Right.
They went back to the master because he is the best. I mean, that guy probably has made more money as a PR vice president than anyone who's ever been in this business because he got a big package from Chrysler. He must have gotten several big packages from General Motors. So, I mean, this guy, I think, has done very well for himself.
Right.
But it makes me wonder, who would make sense to be the next vice president of public relations at GM? And, when Steve was there, he was always grooming Tony Cervone, who's now running PR for Volkswagen of America.
Right.
And another woman who always impressed me a lot is Julie Hamp, who left GM. So I'm told when she was passed over, she ended up as vice president of communications for Pepsi.
Right.
Now is at Toyota as, vice president of corporate communications for Toyota North America. I think she'd be perfect for GM. Or Tony Cervone would be perfect for GM.
So Julie'd have to decide, do I go to Texas or do I go back to Detroit?
That's right.
Because I think they are moving the New York office, the Toyota is moving that down there as well. Well, see, but I would say, okay, if we look inside now, I mean, Terry Radigan, who is... I think he's in charge of product communications for General Motors.
Right.
I mean, in my estimation, he could do the job.
Terry's a great guy, no question about it. But the fact that they haven't turned to him tells me they're going to go outside. They're not going to hire from within. I think they would have done it already if that's what they were going to do.
Well, I just wonder whether things aren't so up in the air there still. I mean, because at least here in the Detroit Metro, I mean, every day there's news related to what's going on with General Motors and ignition switches and whatnot. I mean, and so it's continuing to roil, and I have a feeling that perhaps they're just all hands on deck. Let's do what we have to do to take care of this problem. I mean, I was watching a video today that they'd done a release and showing how they have put the cars through 80 tests on the Milford Proving Grounds to show that as long as you have your key and nothing else hanging from the key, that it will not go to the stop position. And then what I thought was...
Clearly they're watching Autoline after hours, because we said a month ago that the GM should do something like this.
Right. But the thing that I thought was sort of funny, I mean, you go through this whole thing, and I mean, and you've been out to the Proving Grounds, you've driven on the Belgian blocks out there, and the handling courses and whatnot. I mean, and it is grueling. I mean, they really beat the hell out of these cars out there. And but what I thought was sort of amusing is that when they come to the very end of the thing, they indicate that you should only use your General Motors key and not to use a key that is provided by an aftermarket supplier, presumably if you get another key made, because their key has a round hole and other keys have a slot. And I'm just like, what? I mean...
Oh, yeah, because I think that was one of the GM quote-unquote fixes, is if you only had a little hole in the key, you couldn't put all kinds of other keys on it, or maybe not as easily. Whereas if you have this, elongated slot, you could put all kinds of things on the key, or it would be easier to do that. So, yeah.
Right. So I mean, if they're worried about little holes and slots and keys, and to hire the vice president of communications, maybe it was easier just to give Steve a call and say, come on back and help us out here.
Right. Really. Hey, you had an interesting point here. Hybrids versus full-size SUVs.
Yeah, and this is probably really good news for General Motors, and that their turn rates for both the Tahoe and Suburban are just extraordinary.
Meaning they're selling very quickly.
Yeah, and so it's 17 days for the Tahoe and 10 days for the Suburban.
Man.
So this basically means when a truck or a car is delivered to a dealer's lot, how long it's sitting there before someone buys it. And, you can look at industry averages where, it goes out, it's measured in
30, 60 days.
Months.
Nothing,
right. And so here you have these full-size SUVs, which are really nice, very nice vehicles. They've done a fine job on these things. But, wasn't that supposed to be over? Weren't all these things supposed to go wandering off into the past like dinosaurs or something? And then if you look at it, in whether it's Prius sales or Ford C-Max sales or sales of hybrid vehicles or other electrified vehicles, they're either declining or staying even at best. So how do we explain this?
Well, look, we've been reporting on this on Autoline Daily. Hybrids as a group are down 8%. I'm talking about April sales, even though the market was up almost 4%.
Right.
EV sales were up strong. Plug-in sales even stronger. But the numbers are so small that if you take them as a group, sales still fell almost 2% in a market that's up 4%. And to your point, and full-size SUVs, you can't keep them on the lot.
Right. And so...
And gas prices are going up.
So, okay, so here's the question. Is it a case that we've had sort of moderating gas prices, meaning that gas prices didn't have a precipitous rise over the last several months? They've just been sort of bumping along, and people feel satisfied and comfortable enough whereby they're going to say, hey, we're going to buy one of these big SUVs.
Yeah. Hey, Karl Henkel's here. All right.
How are you?
Carl, have a seat. Put on a microphone.
How are you guys?
We're doing pretty good. Traffic's bad, huh?
It's really bad. Apparently you guys have some construction going on in the area?
Whenever the weather's nice, and today is a beautiful day, the weather gets the traffic gets really bad. Everybody wants to go to the lake or something. I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah, they were all coming home from the Tigers game, apparently, too, this afternoon, so...
Yeah, they can't take 96, so they have to take 696.
Nothing like 90 minutes in the car on a 90-degree afternoon.
Jeez.
So you got to see all of these big trucks that are out there and people burning gasoline and...
Yeah, everybody's burning gasoline today.
That's the point we were just talking about, is that sales of full-size SUVs are going through the roof, and hybrids, the whole green car thing is just not happening. As a group, they're down, and even though EVs and plug-ins are up strong, as a group, grouped in with hybrids, the whole group's down. And what I think's happening is we're not seeing the segment grow at all. We're seeing some hybrid buyers say, oh, I'm going to try a plug-in or I'm going to try an electric. But all they're doing is moving from one green car to another. I don't see more people coming into that segment.
Yeah, definitely. The early adopters, it seems like, are the current adopters as well, and you're not getting a lot of the influx of the new buyers, which I guess it's tough to target that, because you figure anybody who has an EV or plug-in offering, they've already kind of targeted the buyer that they're looking for. Now, how do you target the new buyer? I think that's a huge question that people have to figure out.
And what I've heard, I can't quantify it, but what I've heard is that most people who buy a hybrid do not buy a second one. They sort of did their hybrid thing. Maybe they'll go buy another hybrid, but typically not. And again, the segment overall is a little over 3%, when it's sort of been stuck there for quite a few years right now.
But basically, if you think about it, more than half the hybrid market is accounted for by the Prius. That's just how it is. And so the offerings aren't all that great. Do we count the Volt as a hybrid, or do we count that as a plug-in?
Yeah.
Right? But so what hybrid can you buy from General Motors?
You can't.
Okay.
You can get,
so you have a whole corporation.
How you define it, because do you count this mild assist?
See, I wouldn't.
Okay. When I talk about the total numbers,
right,
I'm throwing that into it. So if you want to take them out, the segment's even smaller.
Right? Because it just seems to me that the mild hybrid, the additional battery in the trunk that gives you a little oomph there. how is that different than a start-stop system, essentially? It's a scaled version of a start-stop system, right?
Yeah.
But a hybrid is a hybrid. So you can't buy one from General Motors.
Nothing from Chrysler.
And can you buy one from Nissan?
You can, yes, you can. There's a Pathfinder hybrid.
That's right.
And there's Infinity's got several hybrids.
Okay. And Honda's got hybrid, and Acura's got a hybrid.
Mercedes, BMW. I don't think Audi's got a hybrid yet, right?
I don't think so. So basically, it's like, one explanation is that, how many Priuses can a person buy?
Well, that's it. But, and I'm going off the top of my head, never a good thing to do, but I want to say there's 43 models of hybrids in the U.S. market right now, 6 more than last year. Mm-hmm. So they've added 6 more hybrids, and the segment has shrunk.
Right. Well, I also think part of it is if you think about that, so who thinks about, say, a Camry hybrid or a Fusion hybrid, right? You don't even think about those as being possibilities. So let's say that somebody's going into the market to buy a Fusion or a Camry or a Sonata or you name it, right? And these are all vehicles that have a hybrid variant. Well, isn't it just basically at that point not even a hybrid, non-hybrid? It's just like a powertrain choice as well as, gee, what's this going to cost me on my payment? And so it looks, you look at it from that point of view. But
well, I've asked some dealers about it too, and they said, here's the problem: people shop for cars looking at the highway fuel economy, and there are so many cars now that get better than 40 miles per gallon or in the high 30s. That they just think, boy, I don't need a hybrid. These cars get just as good a fuel economy.
Sure, and you look at it from that point of view, and sort of a segue that sort of goes to this issue of fuel economy as well as to the issue of making that sort of choice. It was interesting that Ford announced that the EcoBoost for the F-150 is just having an incredible take rate. Okay, so here it is. Everyone thought no one would buy a pickup truck with a 6-cylinder engine, right? That's just unthinkable.
Got to have a V8,
and you got to have the V8, and so they said for the 4th month in a row, more than 57% of retail sales of the F-150 are powered by V6 engines. And what's even more astonishing to me is 45% of the trucks that are being purchased with EcoBoost engines. Now, I thought, what does this actually do to the cost? So I looked, and so I priced just a 2014 XLT regular cab, 6.5-foot box, automatic transmission, right? So if you get the standard truck, it comes with a 3.7-liter V6 engine, and so the base price is $30,045. Now, if you want to get the 5-liter V8 engine for that, it costs you an additional $1,000. If you want to get the EcoBoost 6-cylinder engine, it costs you an additional $2,395.
It's amazing.
I
know. This is what the guys at GM haven't got yet, because they tell me, oh, that EcoBoost engine, it's expensive. Yeah, it is, guys. And they charge $2,300 for it. Now,
and 45% of the people are going.
Yeah. What's the purpose of this business? To make money.
Right.
Boy, does that EcoBoost engine make money for Ford.
Isn't that something? It's just incredible.
And it's not even limited to the F-150, too. You look at the other vehicles that have EcoBoost engine options, and even if you go and look at the Fiesta with the 1-liter now, I think it's $1,500 to $1,600 extra dollars just to get to that second trim where you can actually have the possibility of getting that 1-liter engine. So I think the general rule of thumb is $995 or $1,000 will get you the EcoBoost compared to the regular engine. But in reality, it's much more than that, because they're kind of upgauging you to go to the next trim and the next trim and the next trim. So they've branded it well. And obviously they're selling well, and they're making a lot of money off it.
Making a lot of money off it.
So there is a sensitivity that people do have to fuel economy, which I think is the point of how well the EcoBoost is
And they'll
doing.
pay a lot more money to save money at the pump.
There is that.
Some money at the pump. Hey, while we got Karl here, and I know you got to leave early because Hyundai's got an event tonight too. But let's talk about the Fiat-Chrysler 5-year plan, because I know you were all over that thing. And I call it the Bataan Death March, this marathon session that was, it was about 10, 12 hours of presentations, plus breaks, plus dinner and all that. But I mean, it went on forever.
Yeah, it was quite substantial. The amount of information, though, that Chrysler and Fiat divulged is probably
unprecedented.
Yeah,
compared to any other car company.
Nothing like that in the industry. I think, going in, they needed to accomplish a few things, and that was to delineate the brands. Chrysler, what is Chrysler? What is Dodge? Improve Jeep, etc. So I think they hit that. I think a couple things that stood out is they wanted to reduce the overlap, getting rid of the Caravan for one. That's an example.
And just keep the town and country.
And just keep the town and country. And I think they eliminated a lot of the overlap, but then they also added in some new overlaps. I think they'll have 2 or 3 3-row SUVs. You're going to have the Chrysler 100 in the same segment as the Dart. And then you get to the question of how does Chrysler Fiat, who does not have the same cash on hand compared to many of the competitors, pay for what will be a $65 billion plan over the next 5 years. A lot of people are questioning that. I'm kind of questioning that because right now they don't have the volumes for scale. They don't have the money to pay for some of these initial projects. I mean, where are they getting it from?
Didn't he claim it was going to be basically self-funded?
Self-funded, yes.
Yeah. In fact, not even go to the capital markets.
Yeah.
They're not going to borrow. They're not going to use their stuff. Although, even at the same time, he said he wasn't going to raise capital through equity. He talked about these mandatory convertibles, i.e., bonds that will get paid off in stock, have to be paid off in stock, i.e. the mandatory part of it. So even though he says, I'm not going to go to the equity markets to raise cash, I'm going to go to the marketing equities to raise cash, is what he's saying.
Well, he, by the way, is Sergio Marchionne, for those of you who are wondering. So here we are talking about him as though everyone on earth knows who he is.
All right.
I guess one thing you have to think about, too, is what are the profit generators for Chrysler right now? Ram and Jeep, for the most part. And when you look at the Ram plans, nothing huge. They'll get the light duty will get the update in, I think, 2017. So, I mean, you could say that they could take some money from Ram and to a lesser extent Jeep to help pay for some of these other projects. I think Chrysler's pretty much self-sufficient, and their plans aren't, too pie in the sky that they couldn't pay for those. But I just think the scope of what they're trying to do in such a short window of time is kind of unrealistic, and Sergio himself said the plan will rely upon near perfection when it comes to the strategy for the brand. So it's tough to say if it will work. It's very ambitious. They didn't leave any stone unturned, I don't think, but 5 years to do all that,
that's a lot.
It is.
Well, but the thing, you mentioned the minivan, so let's just stick with that for a second. So basically, right now they have the Chrysler Town and Country and then the Dodge Caravan. Right, and so they're going to say, all right, instead of having this in 2 showrooms, we're going to have this in 1 showroom, and then what they're maybe speculating on keeping the Caravan name rather than Town and Country name. But John, I remember over the years you've looked at what happens when a brand goes away in terms of volumes. So when Oldsmobile went away, when Pontiac went away, I mean, all of those numbers, as I recall, and they're not there, right?
Yeah, no, when you close down a brand, when they close down Oldsmobile, it's not as if those buyers went, oh, no problem, we'll buy Pontiacs and Chevys and say, no, you lose most of them. They're gone. They go to other brands, not back to yours. So you're right. You start closing down things like that. You close down a Dodge Caravan. That doesn't mean that those buyers are going to run and buy a Town and Country. Not necessarily.
Right. And so then if you look at the sales of the either one of those individually, right? The Odyssey's outselling them, right? I mean, combined, then I mean, these guys are the giant. But so I just wonder whether that is going to work to his benefit. And it's like it seems to me that Dodge is really getting screwed in this whole thing. And even looking ahead, they're saying in 2018 there's going to be a 10% decline in its numbers. It's like, this is the great American brand.
You have to wonder, too, about the future of Dodge. because if the volumes are going to decrease and Dodge will become a smaller and smaller player in the context of the entire market, is Dodge kind of becoming the new SRT then, which is being phased out or incorporated back into the Dodge brand?
Right.
So you almost wonder if there's some long-term strategy here where there is some brand reduction. And I guess if you look at the plans, Dodge would be the weakest of the Chrysler Fiat brands 5 years from now.
You know, and it's sort of ironic that in the sales of Dodge and Chrysler through April, Dodge brand 198,687 units versus 94,450 units for Chrysler. So basically, Dodge right now has 100,000 more units than Chrysler does, but Chrysler will be the jewel in the crown and not Dodge. That doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't get that.
Well, you wonder, too, though, if they were to pick Dodge as the mainstream brand instead of Chrysler, would they have to do even more work just to, present a compact and a midsize and a full-size sedan? Because I think they've got something good with the 200. We'll see what plays out, considering we thought they had something good with the Dart, and that hasn't turned out too well.
All right.
I just think that maybe starting with Chrysler narrows what they need to do to make that into a mainstream brand versus what they would have had to done with Dodge, and then go back and remake Chrysler into something different.
Well, here's my observation. 5 years ago, everybody said, there's no way Chrysler's going to hit this plan, and Fiat. And they missed a lot of targets. But there's no question the company is far stronger today than it was 5 years ago. And I believe there's no way they're going to hit all these targets for the new 5-year plan. But I do believe 5 years from now, the company will be far stronger than it is today. And just to pick one of the targets that they are absolutely not going to hit, they're forecasting that their market share is going to hit 15.8% of the U.S. market. Well, I looked it up. That means they're going to have to outsell first Toyota and then Ford. I just don't see that happening. Not in a million years, much less 5.
Yeah, and it's almost as though there's this assumption that because they will have something, people will buy the something. So, I mean, if you look at what they're going to do with Chrysler, and that's adding a full-size utility, mid-size utility, and a compact car, right? But, okay, the 300 isn't flying out of showrooms right now. Okay, so they have this car, but somehow it isn't competing up against full-size competitors in a way that you would expect them to be if they were going to be making these great strides. So just by having the car, I mean, Dart, right? Now they're in that segment. But is it like knocking people back on their heels, going, holy moly, we got to do something to the Focus, or the Cruise, oh, it's in trouble? I don't think so.
Yeah.
One of the most intriguing goals that Chrysler outlined was for Jeep, and they forecast industry-wide, global, 3 million more utility vehicle sales by 2018. And
For the industry.
For the industry.
Not just Chrysler.
Not just Chrysler. But then they go on to say that Jeep production will rise from something like 800,000 to 1.9 million by that time period. 1.1 million difference. So they're essentially saying that of the incremental growth, Jeep will achieve 1/3 of that.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that necessarily is attainable, but putting in the context of going to China, I haven't been there, bringing Jeep to other areas, the subcompact Renegade is going to be huge in terms of being a global product. They're going to get a lot, but 1/3 of the incremental growth from now until 2018, that's pretty lofty.
I think it can happen. They're going to build the Renegade in Italy, in Brazil, and in China. That's roughly, I'm going to guess, anywhere from 600 to 750,000 units. That's a long way towards the growth that they've got to get. I actually think that's achievable. Maybe they're not going to get to the full 1.9 million, but with them, especially going into China, and with a strong brand image, even though the Chinese haven't seen much of Jeep lately, and the fact that they really haven't played at all in Latin America, or really outside of North America, Jeep has really done not much of anything. So that's the one part of the plan that I think has got the greatest chance of success.
I look at it kind of a different way, though. And yes, Jeep is well known and they make great products, et cetera. But they're going to enter some segments in areas of the world which they don't compete now that are full of other great products. And when you think about compact SUVs and crossovers, how massive that segment is in terms of number of players. And it's not just going to be them going in there and being able to pick up share like that. They're going to have to compete on the subcompact category as well. They're going to have to compete for those sales. And it's not just going to be, okay, here's a Jeep, buy it.
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought was a real stretch is the goals that they have for Maserati and Alfa Romeo. I mean, they're saying in 5 years, Alfa will sell 150,000 cars a year just in the U.S., 400,000 globally. I think they're targeting 150,000 cars globally for Maserati at the end of 5 years. Whew, boy. Yeah. That's ambitious.
Yeah, just think about it. So it's 0 Alphas right now, and then in 4 years, 150,000? And the thing that sort of struck me looking at the presentations is that they're really, really playing so very much on, the incredible appeal of Italian design. Mm-hmm. Okay? And yes, I'll admit that there are some good Italian designs out there, but is it knocking the Europeans, for a loop, saying, oh my God, we're Germans, we can't design cars because the Italians can do it? I mean, how is Fiat doing in its home market? I mean, not all that great. So I just don't understand how they're banking so much on that characteristic, that aspect, to carry, that part of the business forward.
The only thing I'll give them credit for is when the Fiat 500 came here, I thought, boy, I hope they didn't build a big business plan around this thing, because I see it selling maybe 16,000 units a year. Where in point of fact, with the L thrown in there, they're doing close to 50,000 a year. I had no idea that they could take the Fiat 500 plus the L and get anywhere north of 20,000, much more. They more than doubled that.
Right.
So they know how to sell cars. They do have an understanding of what it takes to really make a brand work. And so I'm not going to totally write them off, because they proved me wrong when it just comes to the 500. They sold far more than I thought they could.
All right, but let's put these numbers in context here, John. Okay, so far, the Fiat brand, both of the cars, the 500 and 500L, have sold 15,723 units. The Journey sold 30,870, nearly twice as much, for a midsize SUV that is, it's okay, right?
Right.
So, growing it, I mean, it's still a relatively small number.
It is.
And that's what I don't understand about all of this plan going forward in terms of having these massive changes. The growth of Chrysler, 132% this is in the NAFTA region. I thought they were very clever, because I started looking at those numbers and it's like, wait a minute, this is NAFTA that they're giving the numbers for, not the United States. So they're putting the whole thing together. But still, I mean, going from 332,000 units to 770,000 units by 2018 for Chrysler. How does this happen? Magic?
Well, obviously, the market doesn't believe it, because Fiat stock got pounded. All the analysts are coming out, to your point, Karl, saying, wait a minute, where are you going to get all the money to do all this? But Sergio was adamant. He said, we're going to generate the cash ourselves to do this.
He was adamant, but then he couched his statements with things like based on near perfection of the brand strategy. And, he even made some comments too, well, if it doesn't work now, we can push some things back and it'll all get accomplished eventually. It's a good 5-year ambitious plan, but if the same plan was presented and we said this is an 8-year timeline, would we be thinking the same thing now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see if he can pull this off. And, he also dangled out the possibility, even though he said he was never going to do it, they could take Ferrari and do an IPO with that. And he's suggesting, which I think is also very ambitious, that Ferrari alone could be worth $15 billion or maybe even more.
The final slide said not for sale, or what was the...
Yeah. He went and explained the value of Ferrari, and then proceeded to say that Ferrari's not for sale. And generally, do you say that if something's not for sale, or is he on a fishing expedition?
Well, he doesn't have to sell it. They can do an IPO and they can raise a lot of cash that way and then sell some of the stock themselves. But, you know, he was saying it makes $500 million a year net and $1 billion, throws off $1 billion in cash. I'm not sure if he was talking euros or dollars, but either way, it's not insignificant. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun watching how this develops over the next few years. My gut is they're not going to hit their targets, but they're going to grow the company and make some money.
Oh, sure. I mean, they're not going away. And, you know, just by going to China, I mean, such a huge market. And, you know, IHS came out today and said between now and 2021, there's going to be an increase of 21 million units, half of which, in the globe, half of which will be accounted for by China. So there's a lot of opportunity there for a lot of people. But, you know, as you were saying, Karl, I mean, there are a lot of players who want pieces of these other markets, or a lot of players that are already established in these other markets. I mean, we see Ford is really aggressively going into China now, and you know, the Lincoln strategy that we talked about last week or week before, you know, predicated a lot on China, and but you know, bringing Jeeps in there will raise their sales immensely, I think.
I think that this plan should probably not be judged on whether they hit these specific number targets. But whether or not they accomplish the overarching goal of going into new regions and separating the brands and creating the identity. Because if that happens and they have a direction and it's a clear direction, the sales will follow. Whether or not it's by 2018, 2019, or 2020, you know, things will move in the right direction. If that part of the plan falls apart, then there's no way that they hit any of those sales targets.
That's exactly right. Hey, look, I know you got to run here, but thanks for stopping in.
Thanks for having me.
Great getting your viewpoints and your look at what's going on with the Fiat-Chrysler thing.
Thanks for having me.
Good. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to transition Karl out of here and get our Gutierrez drag racing boys in here next.
There's only one car company in America that's never made a single car. And while you won't find Firestone cars on any showroom floor, they're out there, running better, faster, stronger, longer. No, we don't build cars. But make no mistake, Firestone is a car company. So whatever you drive a Firestone.
There's only one talk show that covers the issues and executives that drive the auto industry. Turn to Autoline This Week, every Friday at Autoline.tv or on your local PBS stations across America. Autoline This Week. You can't get more inside the industry.
We're back in the studio here, and we've got Phil and JP, the Gutierrez brothers, and their amazing race car in the studio with us here. Welcome to After Hours.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
So let's start with the car, because this thing's just awesome. You know, 2 weeks ago we had an old Model T in the studio. Right. Now we've got the polar opposite of what that thing was all about. And it's awesome to have a full rail, all-out dragster in the studio.
Yeah. How big is that?
In total length, the car's like 28 feet long, but it's a 300-inch wheelbase.
300-inch wheelbase. That's astonishing. And I hear that you guys had to pull the wheelie bars off it, or it would not have fit in the studio here.
That is correct. That is correct. We just made it, as you can see. So it was. I didn't almost think it was going to make it, to be honest with you. But we got it in there, and I said, we'll make it fit.
Well, I know the crew was out here with tape measures, just making sure.
Oh yeah.
Before you guys brought it over here. So, what kind of car is it? I mean, I know it's a dragster, but give us the full lowdown on what this is.
This would be an NHRA Top Alcohol Lucas Oil Racing Series dragster. Okay, and that would be the highest ranking sportsman car you can have. So we're not at the professional level yet, but we're a step below that. So the car will elapse time in the 5.4 second range at about 260 miles an hour. And it'll even pull up to 4 Gs on the starting line.
Wow.
So one of you is the driver and one of you is the engineer, or are you both the drivers and both engineers?
I drive the car and he does all the engineering.
Yeah, I'm definitely not good enough to be the driver. He's got a lot of fly-by-pants feel and experience, so we leave that up to him and I handle the technical aspects.
Yeah, and how did that come to be?
Oh, you've always had the drag racing dream since the beginning.
Yeah, when I was young, we followed a professional Top Fuel team. My father was good friends with the owner, and I was around that forever, growing up. And I seen junior dragsters on the TV, okay, and those are little dragsters, half scale, for kids to drive from the ages of 8 to 16. And then they step into faster cars once they get their actual driver's license. So we got one of those, okay.
One of the junior cars.
One of the junior dragsters. My parents actually purchased it for Christmas. So since then, since I was 8 years old, we started racing with the junior dragster. And of course, every year it got a little faster and a little faster. And then we progressed over to a bigger car once I turned 16, 17. And then we said, well, it's time to get this car.
Time to get serious.
Okay, so you guys are local boys. You're from Berkeley?
Yes.
That's correct.
So for those who don't know, Berkeley is just
One of the suburbs.
north-ish of Detroit, right? So now, when I was growing up, and I would always hear the commercials on the radio for Sunday at Detroit Dragway, Sibley at Dick's, I mean, they'll be with me forever. Is that where you guys went? Or, I mean, I just can't imagine where you would race these cars.
Detroit Dragway wasn't around when I was little. I think it had already.
Yeah, you are, Gary. That's a long gone. But that was Saturday, Detroit. Yeah, those radio ads are burned in my mind, too.
Yeah, well, we grew up racing at like Milan Dragway.
Yeah, okay. Which is still going strong.
Summit Motorsports Park, which is in Norwalk, Ohio. And even some of the smaller tracks like Grand Bend in Ontario. And there was a 131 in Martin, Michigan. Right by Kalamazoo.
Yep.
So those are the local tracks. This car you'll see at the bigger tracks this year, meaning Summit Motorsports Park in Norwalk will be our next race coming up. We just left Lucas Oil Raceway, which is Indy, and we'll be in Joliet at Route 66, and also in Columbus. So we'll be at the bigger tracks, more suited for a car this speed.
Let's, I think, is Chip here with the camera?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about the car and show it to the audience as well. And my first question is, what kind of engine is in there?
Well, that would be a 463 cubic inch Alan Johnson Hemi. Okay, so the traditional 426 Hemi that everybody grew up hearing about in the 60s and 70s, that is a pumped up version of it. It's billet aluminum. Has billet aluminum cylinder heads, but the principle's still the same. It's the same type of engine with the long push rods and the long rocker arms and all that archaic technology, kind of. But it's got a big supercharger on top of it, and they didn't come with those from the factory in the 70s. So, and that is a screw supercharger that the camera's showing right now, and we run the car on methanol. And it's also got one magneto, one 44-amp magneto. That would take the place of a distributor, okay? And that's how we fire the cylinders, and then we have a big, large fuel pump on there that puts about 20 gallons per minute into the engine.
Boy.
How big is the fuel tank?
Fuel tank is 10 gallons, and we'll go through.
So you burn it all up?
Yeah, about 8 gallons.
So running the engine for 30 seconds is a long time.
Oh yeah.
You have to fill it up after the warm up, though.
Oh yeah.
Even in the pit area, yeah, we keep it full.
So, I mean, do you buy that engine or do you work on that engine?
Well, we built the engine.
You built the engine?
Yes. So you buy the pieces, we buy the block, buy the cylinder heads, and then we go ahead and put everything together, meaning we spec out valve lengths, valve springs, type of rockers we'd like to run, pistons, rods, crankshaft, that type of stuff. So but the block is pretty much, for the class, that's kind of the block everybody runs, the engine block. And then the cylinder heads, there's of course a bunch of options, but that's the same style, meaning the ports are different or the valve sizes are different, but the style of cylinder head's still the same. It's still a Hemi cylinder head.
Does that go for the chassis too? It's common throughout the series?
You'll see a lot of cars that maybe a little bit shorter. Some of them are anywhere from 5 to 30 inches shorter. That's preference, depending on what that particular race team thinks works. But basically, the cars all look similar, I'll say. Some of them have different wings on them, or different ideas of the aerodynamics or something like that.
So why is it so long? Does it have to do with something that if it were shorter that it wouldn't go? I mean, that you'd like.
Well, it's easier to control down track. I feel the longer it is. It's easier to stabilize.
You should make it a quarter of a mile long, and then you'd win every race.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a rule.
No, just make it an inch shorter, and then it just.
There you go. But the longer you get the car, the more you can get the chassis to work and help in your benefit, is what we feel.
So, Phil, as an engineer, what kind of engineering do you do on this car?
Well, this is a really great transition from what I do at work every day. So this is a lot of hand fabrication, and when we need a unique part or we need something that's going to help aid the race team, a special tool or any kind of parts we need for the race car or the trailer, that's the kind of stuff I'm designing on CAD and hand making. So mill, lathe, welder. It's a real good takeaway from the normal stamping and production of the automotive industry every day. So
you said an interesting thing. You guys have regular jobs, and you're doing this on the side.
absolutely.
With the goal of doing what? Going professional at some point?
That could be a goal one day. Yeah, right now we're pretty content where we are.
Having fun.
Having fun. Well, yes, it's a very serious hobby for us. But right now we are having fun.
But I'm looking, it looks like you got some fairly serious sponsors. I mean, it's emblazoned with MGM Grand Detroit, which of course is one of the big casinos in this area. You landed a pretty big sponsor there.
Yes. Yes, we did.
Yes, he says. So can you make money at this, or at least pay all your bills through your sponsorship? Or
I think there's probably a better quotation in drag racing that to make $1 million, you have to spend $2 million, or you have to get $2 million.
I would agree with that.
Well, that's the old racing joke, right?
Yep.
You want to know how to make a small fortune in motor racing? Start with a big fortune.
That's right. So
that couldn't be more correct.
So I mean, I've got to believe just one of the slicks back there has got to be
$500.
$500.
And how many races do they last?
maybe like 1.5, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
1.5, 2 races, yeah. The car likes to eat parts. I mean, we feed it quite often. It's got rods and pistons and rings and
Everything
tires.
has a lifespan.
Yeah, everything has a lifespan.
Well, you rebuild the engine after every run, pretty much, don't you?
Yep.
Engine and clutch.
Wow.
Put new clutch plates and floaters, and then the transmission will also get rebuilt.
So we'll come back after the lap, yeah, and that's one of my jobs on the team. I'll actually lay underneath the car, and I'll take the rod bearings down, and I'll check the main bearings and do the regular service, and John Paul will be in the trailer looking at the data and tuning the race car. So we work in harmony like that. He's very much a technical wing, and I'm kind of the fabrication engineering wing and service guy wing. So
how many other people are like you? I mean, how many others compete in this series?
There's probably 60 cars total across the country in this class. Now, when we go to the racetrack, there'll be anywhere from 8 to even 15, 16 cars to compete for 8 spots at a regional level.
So there are 4 regions, I think, in
Yes.
yes,
so across the country.
yes.
And so there are people who are from California to the East Coast, and then you guys in the middle. So you go to one of these tracks in Ohio or what have you, and that's where the competition shows up. I mean,
Yes, you could have somebody show up from anywhere in the country to race against you.
Yeah, the race coming up this next weekend, is it, Norwalk? Yeah, it'll be probably one of the highest attended sportsman races this season, so they'll have upwards of 20 to 25,000 people there, and there'll probably be 16 or 17 cars that show up for an 8-car field. So
wow.
It makes the competition that much more narrow. I mean, you'll go from 1 to 8, it'll probably be 5.31 to 5.42 seconds in a lapse time. So there's a very narrow window there, and it makes the competition for the fans that much more exciting.
So do you run qualifying races? Is that the way it winnows down, or is
Yes.
it?
So essentially, we'll do 3 qualifying passes, and then your fastest time will be qualified in the order. So we can run very fast on the first run and bad on the next 2, but still be qualified well.
And are you racing someone when you're doing this, or are you just out there by yourself?
That would be you are racing somebody, but it's your
It's
own,
your time, yeah.
Yeah, it's your time against the rest of the field, but you do go down in pairs, just as if you were racing.
And are there specific requirements about, like, the engine can't be greater than some level? And I mean, so there are parameters, so
Yes.
it's an even playing field, as it were?
Yes, there's a whole big rule book on it. So in our class, there's actually 2 different types of vehicles. What you're seeing here is a blown alcohol version, okay? Now, there are also injected nitro versions where there's no supercharger, and they use nitromethane as a fuel, though, whereas we use methanol. And also,
So let me guess, you guys are faster.
yeah, well, we're pretty even.
Really?
Everybody's pretty even.
I would think the blower would give you a massive off-the-line acceleration.
It does do that, yes. But they can come around.
That
the top
nitro
end.
makes up for a lot, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's
Really?
a dual magneto setup too, so they'll have
two
two spark
magnetos.
plugs in there. So the blown cars tend to run good in different weather than the alcohol cars, or I'm sorry, the nitro cars tend to run different weather. So it's a trade-off.
You know what's funny to me is I look at this thing, 28 feet long, very sleek, very narrow. Everything looks so aerodynamic, and then you got this big-ass engine just hanging out there in the wind. You know, it's got to be almost as bad as a parachute.
Yeah, but it makes a lot of power to overcome that.
Why doesn't anyone fare that in, or the rules don't allow that?
You know what? You could, but I don't think aerodynamically that would help. Because,
No kidding.
because your progression from 0 to 260, it's not like you're stabilized like a streamliner. It's not like we're starting out going 100 miles an hour. So when you from 0 to 260 in 5.4 seconds, I'm not sure that would help us as much as you might think.
I still think it would. You know, in a street car, pretty much anytime you go over 50 miles an hour, more of the engine work is to overcome aerodynamic resistance than it is the friction or the weight of the car.
Right, but remember, this car is very narrow and very long, of course. So
Okay.
we've already made it aerodynamic by doing that, right?
Okay,
So
gotcha. So you're
the
throwing a lot
engine-
of wind around the engine.
Right, and the big windscreen on there gets the air up over the top of the engine. And really the only thing you'll see on some of the Nitro professional versions, they have kick-out plates. We call them mud
yeah,
flaps.
right. I have
And
seen
that'll help direct the air around the tire, okay, and the valve covers. But for us, putting those on the car will slow the car down anywhere from 3 to 7 miles an hour in the quarter mile. So for us, we're not at that level to where it would be beneficial.
Yeah.
So basically, when the Christmas tree counts down, assuming you still have Christmas trees,
Yes.
Absolutely.
you just put your foot on it and all the way to the floor and
Well, I wish it was that simple.
okay.
This car here, being that it is blown alcohol, we leave at around 6,000 RPM is where we drop the clutch, okay? So it would work like a regular everyday vehicle where you might have a manual transmission, just call it Corvette, okay? And you put the clutch pedal in and you rev the motor up and you sidestep the clutch, okay? And then you take off. That's kind of how it works, okay? Same thing, same principle. I rev the motor up to a certain RPM, and then when the tree comes down, the swapping of feet is very important. So if you put your foot on the throttle more so before you let the clutch out, you will leave at a different RPM. And starting line RPM is very important for these cars. To get down the track with the tune-up you have and the setup you have in it, that's something that's very important.
How many gears do you go through?
3. This is a 3-speed transmission. So and those are switched by 2 air buttons.
And it's kind of a sequential box? You're just pulling back on a stick?
No, it's actually just push an air button, and it's a planetary transmission. So once we leave the starting line and we take off, you don't do anything with the clutch pedal. And it works. You just push a button for second gear and push a button for third gear.
So I mean, you're going so fast. I mean, how do you know when you're pushing these buttons, or you're just like?
Well, that's most of the time how I'm doing it. But the way you're supposed to do it is there's a shift light on the dashboard that comes on at a certain RPM that we have set, and then you're supposed to hit the button at that point. So, but watching the tack swing or something like that, it would be very difficult in a car going this fast.
Got to be an awful lot of vibration, too.
There is.
So to try to watch for attack is going to be very uncertain.
Right. To be
As opposed to a
precise.
light, then you just go.
Right.
All right, seriously, can you see anything?
Oh yeah, yeah. When you're in the car after you've driven for a while, the speed isn't as fast as it seems outside of the car. It's like slow motion in the car. So
give me some tips here. Next time I have to go drag racing, when do you really let out the clutch when the lights are coming down the Christmas tree? You don't wait till they go green.
Oh no, don't do that. You'll be late. Definitely the last yellow. This car actually uses where all 3 lights flash at the same time, which is called a Pro Tree. So the Christmas tree you're talking about would be a Sportsman, like a 500 tree, they'd call it, where the lights kind of go like this.
Yeah.
Right? And that's on the third one. That's when you'd leave.
That's when you leave.
Yep.
So on yours, how does it work then?
All three lights flash at once, okay, and then the green comes on. Okay, so when all three lights flash real quick, that's when you
let it go.
That's when you let it go.
And you got a parachute in back to stop it too?
Two of them.
Two of them.
Mm-hmm.
What's the G load like when they pop?
That's probably a -3 or so, and
Wow.
that's equally with this car as hard to handle as any point in the rest of the run. When those parachutes hit, it puts the car out of shape, and you bounce around a little bit and all that stuff. So your job's not done when you hit the finish line. Your job's only done when you're out of the car as a driver.
So are you steering? I mean,
oh yeah.
And how much steering do you have? I mean, what's the?
It'll steer pretty good. I mean, I could get it real sideways.
It's only got a 60-foot turning radius, right?
Yeah, that part's like a bus. But down track, the car will sashay, we'll say. So depending on whether it follows the groove of the racetrack where all the rubber is, or if it gets out of the groove and drives one way, or if I have to pull it back. With a dragster, it's more of a finite move. So as opposed to like a short, funny car or something shorter would be a lot more movement. Mm-hmm. Whereas these are like a finesse thing.
Very interesting. And so it's got to be like a kick in the back when those chutes really pop open.
Oh yeah, we have a 7-point seatbelt system in this car. Okay, and if you didn't
7 points.
7 points. Yes, 3.
You're gonna have to look at them afterwards.
Oh yeah.
I'm familiar with 5. I don't know where you'd get the
we'll
other
have
two.
to put you in the car. Yeah, it's 3 in the center, 2 on the side, and 2 shoulders. Now, if we didn't have those belts, I imagine I'd be somewhere 500 or 600 feet in front of the car when the chutes hit. I mean, it throws you forward so hard. I don't even know what to compare it to.
And what's the G taken off? You said up to 4?
About 4.
And that's right at the line, or are you feeling that all the way down the track?
We'd like to, but we'd have to make a lot more horsepower for that. You will feel that probably for the first 2 seconds of the run. Mm-hmm. It'll increase as depending on the setup, of course, and how good the track is and what you have going on. But the more the car pulls, the more G-force you are feeling, the faster you're going, right? And once it's kind of slows down and you're kind of just hanging out, then you're not progressing. You're kind of just going along now. You're not really making any more horsepower, if you will. So naturally, at the finish line, you're not going to pull as hard as you would at the starting line because your weight's already moving. You're already going 200 and we cover the 8th mile, 660 feet, at about 210 miles an hour. So that first part of the track from 0 to 660 feet, going 0 to 210 miles an hour is where all your G-force is going to happen.
Wow.
So if we go back to my childhood when I heard that on the radio to today, what are the technology differences in the vehicle? I mean, have there been big changes?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, the biggest part of it all is probably going to be the manufacturing of all the pieces and components. So we went from a lot of cast stuff way back then to now we're into billet aluminum. And obviously the role of electronics in the cars as well. I mean, we can electronically control our ignition system, our fuel system, and we can monitor a lot more data than they could when the 60s and 70s drag races were happening. So just the advancement of normal automotive technology is kind of integrated in a real simple way into drag racing to help us find our way and log more accurate data and have more reliable parts.
Mm-hmm. It's the same principle as, back in the day they used spark plugs, right? They'd look at the spark plugs and you'd see an old guy with his glasses down and he'd be checking them out and he'd be telling you, oh, it's got too much fuel, it doesn't have enough fuel. Well, nowadays there's no need to look at spark plugs. We monitor 15, 20 items on the car.
Well, I'm sure you got scan tools anyway that you're looking at everything.
Kind of. The car has a data recorder on it, so as it goes down the track, we download after the run, and when we download it, it's got graphs and it's got numbers, and it'll tell you everything the car did. And that old-time spark plug reading's kind of a thing of the past, if you will.
You should do it just to flip people out.
So you get the data, you're looking at the telemetry. Are you making adjustments then before you're in the final race, or is it too difficult to do that?
No, just about every run we change something on the car.
Really?
So whether that's good or bad, we don't know yet. But when we look at the data, that'll tell us whether, for the weather conditions that we were in, if the tune-up was correct, meaning the fuel system, meaning the ignition system. As far as the clutch is concerned, that tune-up, once you learn the track, can almost stay the same. But each effect you make on the car affects something else in the car. So then you have to go maybe compensate one item because you added more to another item. So that balance you keep for the whole run is important, and that comes with years of experience of tuning or knowing what the car wants, or my knowledge of this car might not work with somebody else's car.
When the light goes green, bang, you're going. Do you know within like a second whether you've won the race or not?
No, you don't know that.
Do you know? Do you think, I'll catch him by the end? I mean, the race is over in a matter of seconds, so.
Yeah, you can see the other. If you can see the other guy, you haven't won yet. But sometimes, yes, you can leave the starting line and never see the other guy's front end of the car. You'll see the front nose, the front wheel, or something. And sometimes they'll hang right with you. And then there's other times where you'll go down the track and not see them, and right at the finish line like that, there they come.
Wow.
So and equally, kind of like to give you an idea, it would be similar to if somebody pulled the parachutes on me, or if you were going down the freeway and the car next to you guys were going neck and neck, and the car next to you slammed on the brakes and disappeared. Or one guy went past you at 130 miles an hour and you were doing 60. It's just that quick where at the finish line somebody could come after you or go away, or you guys could be neck and neck. It could be a good race, and in the first 100 feet of the track you could know who wins or loses.
Yeah, because it's not like other forms of racing where, you think, well, my strategy later in the race, I can do this and we'll get good pit stops. Or it's like, no, boom, 5 seconds, you're done.
Yeah, he was just talking earlier.
Instant gratification, yeah, absolutely. But a lot of our strategy, where drag racing is really the technical aspect of it, and what we do in the pits to gauge what the weather is going to be when we get to the starting line at 6 o'clock, what we think the track is going to be like, and how we're adjusting our car to fit for those conditions. So it's a technology in the way of we're making a snap decision to see what those conditions are going to be like in that time when we're going to race.
And the big variables are temperature and humidity then?
A lot of that, temperature, humidity, your adjusted altitude, your density altitude, air density index, a lot of those play into how much power the engine's actually.
So you guys bring a little weather station with you?
Not a little one, a big one.
No kidding.
We actually, when we're in the staging lanes, he has a pager that pages him every 2 minutes with the weather.
Yep, and I can give him updates when he's in the car, so
that way
we talk back and forth.
Changes.
And yep.
So what changes can you make? So he calls you, you're in the car, and he says, oh, there's a front coming through, or the barometer has just changed.
Well, right now, because we're not so technically advanced, we can change some stuff in the fuel system, and I can change the tire pressure, which are two variables we can do relatively easy. If you have a lot of experienced crew guys, you can actually go in the bell housing, you can change bell housing weight. Some of the guys have laptop computers with them in the staging lane, so you can change the timing curves, you can change other stuff like that. I mean, it depends on how many advanced guys you're willing to put in the staging lanes to work on your car. So right now,
this is not the professional level. These are guys that you're racing against?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of serious businessmen we race against where this is a really, I mean, obviously we have the wonderful MGM Grand Detroit on the side of the car, but they have their own personal businesses, and their source of funding is unlimited, where ours is a little bit more budgetary, so they can afford to have those guys come in.
Like with any form of racing, even in the lower levels, it gets very competitive. I mean, there's guys in every weekend racing at a local track that'll be just like we are, where they're watching the weather with a little handheld unit or something, and they're changing this or changing that, or they have a crew guy that's maybe messing with the carburetor or messing with the timing. And a lot of cars these days have digital ignition systems. Like this car, we can change the timing 30 times down the track, and in 5 seconds to make 30 changes would be a lot, right? But we can do it, and we can change the fuel system going down the track, and all it takes is a couple buttons on the old command module, it's called.
Is there anything that you can do as a driver? Do you think, I'm going to slip the clutch a little bit more, I'm going to punch the second gear later, or,
Well, that would all be done with the clutch. If you were going to slip the clutch, you would take weight off it or take base off of it, we call it.
It's not like you slipping the pedal.
Oh, no, you can't do that. No, I don't think that would work. However, though, as a driver, the only thing I could personally change if the car was all set up would be the starting line RPM, where I could leave lower, like at 4,000, or higher at 6,500 maybe. That would affect the run as well. So as far as a short shifting it or shifting late, I might do that anyways. So,
but not on purpose.
Not on purpose, yeah.
That's great. Hey, look, we've got a number of questions coming in. I think we got to get to the part of the show where we take the audience questions, which we call rapid fire. So, Ben,
a lot of good questions.
Let's let it rip. Okay, we got a bunch of things in here. JM1NB wants to know, what is the simplest fix that caused the largest increase in performance or the most spectacular destruction of an engine?
That would be the main jet. We could change the fuel. The main jet would be your total amount of fuel, okay, that you have going in the engine. And if we change that too much and don't put enough fuel in it, we could, of course,
scrap aluminum, nothing but scrap aluminum. Yeah.
And if we put too much in it, we could lose a bunch of horsepower. And that's all depending on what the weather conditions are. Yep. That's how we'll make that call.
He's also got another question, which I should have asked myself. You running 1,000 feet or 1,320?
This car runs the 1,320. Mm-hmm. We're a full quarter mile.
Because presumably you're not going as fast as some of the other cars, so you have enough
shutdown area.
Shutdown area. There
That's
you go. You got a question there, Gary?
No, okay. Looking at these, it's.
This is not necessarily to you guys, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. This comes in from Casimir, who says, what's the auto industry's strategy to deal with youth's waning interest of cars?
Well, I think that's pretty interesting. Probably, I would say the re-engagement in motorsports and getting people excited about buying performance cars. Again, I think you're seeing some of that resurgence with the Corvette and the Camaro and bringing back a lot of the old previous brands. And also the auto industry is once again taking an active interest in motorsports and trying to bring back some of that excitement you see on the track and in the local dealerships, but also with attention to safety and fuel economy and all the things we strive for in my normal working environment. So just trying to tie all those things in, and also with a luxury appeal for the younger buyers like myself who might want a nicer car with nice performance.
You know, I think you're onto something. Motorsports is what got me interested in this business. And, and then I found out more about cars and the industry, and my interest expanded. But, it was still motor racing that got me into all this in the first place. So I like what you said.
Yep.
So are you guys interested in other types of motor racing besides this? I mean, not necessarily to compete in it, but do you watch car racing?
Sure, absolutely. I love the intricate engine building of like NASCAR or IndyCar, especially Formula One. Those guys are like well-oiled machines every time they go race. So I love watching that. I know he enjoys every form of racing as well, and it's some things can carry over too, where you might watch TV and you might say, well, those guys are doing something that might be pretty cool to do on our car.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Dr. Botox wants to know, does the 4G load upon launch cause the fuel to shift back to the back of the cylinder, or does the fuel remain evenly dispersed in the cylinder? That's a great, I would have never thought of that. Mm-hmm.
It does go towards the back. And these cylinder heads are made, traditional Hemi cylinder head had the spark plug in the back. So if you were to take a circle, the spark plug would be biased towards the back of the cylinder.
Unbelievable. That never ever occurred to me.
So how was the combustion then at the start, before?
Well, that's something that now we're getting into real technical stuff. To be honest with you, with the amount of boost, this car makes upwards of 60 pounds of boost. And the way the fuel is entered into the cylinder on the backside of the valve, the fuel comes right in on the backside of the intake valve. The way it atomizes going in there, you'd have to be a real smart person to know how it actually looks inside the cylinder, because we can't put a camera in there. We'd all love to, but we can't.
Okay, here's another question for you from Dr. Botox. What's your pulse rate or heart rate during a race?
I'm very calm.
Yeah, I think it's probably...
Have you ever monitored yourself?
Oh, no. No, that's one thing we don't monitor on the car.
Well, yeah, you're looking at a tack at 6,000 RPM. Your heart could still be 180, and you think I'm calm.
Well, you're very, very right. I could be more excited than I am, but as you make a bunch of runs in the car and go down the track, it becomes less exciting, if you will, right? Now you start noticing the little things that happened in the run, like, oh, it shook a little here, or it was really pulling there. I was late on third gear, I was early on second gear, whatever the case may be. Now you start noticing the finite points of the run.
It's definitely the strangest thing. I mean, he talks about it a little bit too. When I'm on the starting line, just watching him go down the track, it seems like an eternity. And the time flashes up on the scoreboard, 5.5 seconds or 5.6 seconds, and it feels like it took him an hour to get down there. But you notice all the little things, and I'm sure he does too. It's like it's almost in slow motion.
Yeah.
So,
Are there strategies that you pick up from other drivers, and are there strategies that you pick up from other builders and who are fabricating for their cars?
Oh, sure. I mean, we're good friends with everybody out there, and they everybody kind of has their own way of doing stuff, but watching them can help you sometimes. Maybe if you see where, maybe they're doing this a little bit, or they're putting their car here in the track, that might help you, because if he gets a chance to go look at the track and there's 10 cars in front of us that run in that particular lane, and all of them are on the right side, and they all don't make it down the track, but the one guy on the left side makes it down the track, well, it's an obvious choice. We want to be on that side of the track.
yeah.
Here's an interesting question from Aventador. Any interest in electric drag racing?
It's very unique. You should mention that. Probably one of the names you recognize from your youth, Big Daddy Don Garlitz, has actually built an electric-powered dragster, and he is trying to take it to 200 miles an hour. So that is going on right now in Florida. Some of the people that actually supply parts to us are supplying some parts for that car as well. But it's a unique take on drag racing. One of the probably downfalls of drag racing is after you run the car and there's all the excitement, you have to go back to the pits and work on the car. So this year the NHRA is trying to do 50 minutes in between rounds and actually show some of the drag racing live on TV. A lot of the coverage you see on TV is tape delayed, but the take on it from Big Daddy's aspect is that with a battery-powered car, you would go back to the pits and you would plug it in, and there would be nonstop action for the fans. So once again, in the idea of keeping racing as a form of entertainment.
But isn't the noise part of it, though?
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say.
experience,
Get rid of the noise. Now it doesn't really sound like anything.
So have you guys participated in a cackle fest with this car?
No, we have been to Cackle Fest, but never with this car.
Well, explain that.
Well, a Cackle Fest is old nitro cars, usually relics or cars that were restored, vintage, and they start them up as they were back in the day. And they cackle them. They call it cackle because the nitro makes a cackling sound.
And they'll get a group of these cars.
Oh, yes.
And they won't race. They'll just sit there, start them all up. And the noise is like you cannot believe.
And that goes back to what you said. The noise is part of drag racing, I think.
It most definitely is. Going back to JM1NB, have you ever brought something to the strip that, while legal at least to you, the officials turned around and said, never bring that here again?
No, that hasn't happened to us.
Oh, you guys don't know how to race.
No. We read the rule book.
Well, the old NASCAR one, it ain't cheating if you don't get caught.
That's true.
So what is So what is technical inspection like? I mean, are they all over these things, or?
Absolutely, it's fairly diligent, and I mean they'll check to make sure all your parts are certified, all the welds look good. There's a separate chassis inspection that actually goes on before the season starts, as compared to the normal race-to-race technical inspection. But I mean, because these cars go so fast, and this is really considered sportsman racing, they really have an eye towards safety. Are your seatbelts okay? Are your head restraints in there? Show me your helmet. Show me your neck restraint device. Just every race in case something amiss happens, and they definitely keep an eye out for the competitors and make sure everything's safe.
Aventador's got another great question. After going so fast on the track, how do you deal with speed limits and traffic out on the street?
Oh, I drive like an old grandma. I get my fill. My girlfriend always tells me, "Now you drive so slow," but I get my fill of going fast with this car. Everywhere else, I just drive nice and easy.
And with the upward-facing exhaust pipes, they must generate downforce. And what kind of downforce do they generate?
I don't know the actual number, but they do help in that respect. And the angle of which you put them as compared to where the wing is also helps you. So the air coming out of the engine, the exhaust, is what you say is dirty air.
Yeah.
And then if you put that directly in the wing's path, the wing is less efficient because it's in dirty air as compared to.
Do the rules regulate what angle? So you can play around with that yourselves.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you guys do CFD, computational fluid dynamic
I've seen
analysis?
they do that. Chrysler was involved in drag racing with the funny cars, and I think they still are with Matt Hagan, but they use only some of that modeling technology is accurate because it's very hard to simulate the race car going down the track and the effect of the crosswind and the downforce and things like that. But there are thermal models, but not necessarily for a dragster. They're usually for funny cars.
Dragsters change quite a bit going down the track. If you look at NHRA professional drag racing, if you watch the TV and watch a dragster go down the track, the center of the car will actually bow up at the finish line, if you've ever seen that. So next time you watch it, pay attention that at the finish line, the car will be 7 to 8 inches taller in the center. It'll look like a big arc. Okay, and that gets back to earlier, we talked about the longer car having more workable chassis, and that's what I'm talking about is the flex. So the more flex you can achieve, you can weight transfer. So in addition to the car making an arc, that puts the front wings up at an angle, and it lays the rear wing down. So it's something that in a wind tunnel would be very hard to simulate. Whereas a funny car has a body, and you can simulate that because there's no visible flex going on. But in a dragster, it's very difficult.
I'm going to have to watch for that. I was not aware there was that. I mean, you see them when they're coming up to the line. They're pretty bouncy cars, really. Is there any suspension at all?
No.
Okay, that's why they're so bouncy.
The only spring that we have is the tire.
The tire, yeah. So, but I was not aware that the chassis would flex that much.
Oh,
I mean, it kind of makes sense being so long. There will be some flex, but not to the degree that you just mentioned. That's incredible.
As you put power to it, it will flex.
And here's another question. How do you keep the wheel rims from spinning inside the tires?
Well, that's a very good question. We have what's called bead locks on there. And so the bead of the wheel the bead of the tire, rather, will go up against the bead of the wheel, and then a big ring.
Locking ring
with 24 bolts in it will go on there. So some competitors choose to use a different type of system, which would be called a liner. And that would have what I always call an IndyCar tire inside the actual slick that you would fill to some 50 pounds of tire pressure, and it would hold the bead against the rim.
Dr. Botox wants to know, too, what's the demographic of a drag race crowd these days? Vietnam vets or under 25 males?
I think right now that's probably the struggle most American motorsports are going through. You're seeing a little bit of a decrease in attendance, and I know they just had a drag race down in Houston where they deemed it to be sold out. So in our sport, it tends to be some of the middle-aged crowd, we'll say the 30 to 50 crowd, but I think we obviously need to bring in some of the younger crowd. It's kind of lost. I mean, the people that have seen drag racing from back in the 50s and 60s aren't necessarily engaged today because the cars are so different. You might remember Big Daddy had a front-engine car, and now the cars kind of look like rocket ships, and they're not anything really close to what street vehicles would be, but it's definitely a little bit more of a senior crowd, we'll say, at the drag races these days.
What's the fastest you've ever driven?
In this car, we've been 5.62 seconds at 255 miles an hour. So, but we're going to improve upon that next weekend.
Absolutely.
We're going to hopefully enter into the 260 mile an hour range at 5.4 seconds.
Casimir wants to know, were you guys racing in Abu Dhabi a few years ago?
We were there working on a Yas Marina car was the name of the race vehicle we worked on. So yes, both of us went over there.
Yep.
And it was interesting to be over in Abu Dhabi.
We actually both had stints on professional drag racing teams. So even though I went to school for engineering, I worked for a race car team for 3 years, and he also grew up working for a race car team too. So when you're in that role, there's always people that are looking for some good mechanics to go work in unique situations. So I brought him with Abu Dhabi with us to go work on that car, and I also went to Australia before that to work on a drag racing team for 10 days. So it's afforded us a lot of unique experiences. But if you're a good mechanic and you can travel, they will take you to some places you've never been before.
Yeah, Youngblood from Cleveland, Ohio, just wrote in, saying, Big Daddy Don Garlett's his electric went 184 miles an hour, 7.25 seconds.
Yep, he's getting close. I saw the story where they were tuning on that thing to get the electric motor efficiency up and work on taking it to the next level. So he's almost there. That's a pretty unique project for drag racing. It's drawing a lot of attention.
I'll make this the last question then. What's the ideal temperature to produce the best run?
Well, that's pretty easy. That's called a standard day. And that would be 60 degrees, 29.92 absolute baro, and 0% humidity. So that would be what you would dyno an engine at. would be your standard day. And of course, the automotive industry, I believe that's called SAE. The automotive industry would use a different one, and I believe that incorporates some humidity as well as to where they get their horsepower numbers from.
Got to be, because where in the world can you physically experience zero humidity?
Absolutely. It's a correction factor, if you will.
Gotcha. Hey, this has been fascinating. This is really interesting. I'm so glad that you guys came here. I'm even more glad.
That is incredible.
With the car. Yeah, the car is just mind-blowingly good.
Well, thank
really
you very
cool.
much for your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, lots of luck to you guys. I think you're doing a great job. Like I said, you got some pretty impressive sponsors on the side of this car.
Yeah,
so.
we're very proud to have the MGM Grand Detroit with us. It's been a great
well,
great
that tells me
experience
you guys know how to run this as a business, not just as a car down the track.
Yep.
And that's the key to success in motor racing, is you got to understand the business aspects of it. So more power to you. And it's been awesome having you on Autoline After Hours.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you as well.
Well, Gary, another good show.
Another show, and
I'm leaving it in your hands. I'm going to be on vacation next week.
So next week, sort of keeping in this theme of racing, we're going to have Jim Campbell, who's General Motors Vice President of Performance Vehicles and Motorsports. So we're going to talk racing. We're going to talk Corvettes. We're going to talk all kinds of good things. So your loss is my game,
no,
John.
Look, it's my loss. It is. I hate to miss that. So yeah, ask them. What's the next step? They're in NASCAR, they're in Indy. The Corvette, of course, is in GT racing, but what about the bigger series? What about Formula One someday? What about fighting for first place overall at Le Mans someday? So,
Or drag racing.
or drag racing.
That's not a bad sport either.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Real good. So, Gary, I'll leave it in your fine hands, and
All
I'll
right.
see you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I want to thank everybody for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone. Your journey, our passion.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern. Get your daily news fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.